Hello and welcome to today's show on Our Game with myself, Michael Verney, Kieran Carey, and as ever, Richie Power will arrive at the right moment just as we're getting going. We're going like Klopp's Liverpool today. We're going with the full quad. Let's get all four on board and see how we get on. Kieran, how are you?
I'm good, lads. Good to see you.
Yeah, Michael?
All good, Shane. Yeah, just some weekend ahead, lads, when you think about it and all the different permutations. And with the best will in the world, you could make all your predictions, and we will. But as we saw the last time in 2019 in that Leinster finale on that Saturday evening, anything can happen. I think that's the great thing about this weekend. Shane, ye boys even have a chance of qualifying, which nobody thought was possible.
Tipper back.
I don't think it's any accident. Actually, he's making an appearance again today. Keeping one of the chance.
No, but it is brilliant, Kieran, that every team going into this weekend. I mean, Limerick are already through; they're not playing this weekend, but it's like a fantastic situation where every team has something to play for.
Yeah, it's brilliant the way it's worked out, to be fair. And Clare, after last week, they've confirmed they're back in the Munster final. And, they all have a chance mathematically. But at the end of the day, Cork have their own destiny in their own hands. So if they jump to defence, that takes the mathematical equation out of it. So it's fairly basic for Cork. They have to get a win. And to get a win, they're the third team.
Yeah, Richie, great to have you on the show. We were just saying there, it's brilliant that every team going into this weekend, Limerick aren't playing, but every other team that is playing has something to play for.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Shane. I suppose if we had said it at the beginning of the championship that it had come down to the last day, you'd be delighted. Obviously, as Kieran said, the Munster finalists are known, but the remaining three teams in Munster are, it's all there for them, really. I suppose Tipperary are probably the real outsiders to go through, but they still have a chance, and that's the reality of it. I'd say, if they had it, they would have taken that after their first two defeats. So, looking forward to it, but I suppose again, just to reiterate what Kieran said, Cork have their fate in their own hands, really. They win on Sunday, they're into an All-Ireland quarter final.
Michael?
It's in a mad scenario. Like after the league final, we were like Waterford were team number 2 in the country, the closest to Limerick, and now they're in an awful spot going into the weekend. You'd imagine heads will be totally right in that they'll go to Ennis to try and produce a big result, but to have to rely on somebody else, and like just the irony of Liam Call's team relying on Liam Call's native county, which he turned down to manage. Like it's a bizarre kind of scenario. But from their point of view, they need to be tunnel vision, Waterford going to Ennis and just produce a result, and I suppose keep your fingers and toes crossed after that.
Yeah. And Kieran, I suppose if we're to look at last weekend, Clare 24 points, Limerick 121. Your county obviously made a few changes in that. It was a fantastic game, rip-roaring game, level on 14 occasions. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I suppose it was brought back a lot of memories because it was a typical match that you'd expect down in Ennis. Clare had to treat it as their All-Ireland final if they were to progress, and they did. We were chatting last week, and I fancied Clare, to push Limerick all the way. And, the final whistle went. A lot of people say, draw's a fair result. Yeah, but actually watching it, I suppose Limerick probably missed the chances. And, there's some awesome displays, in fairness to Kelly, watching Tony Kelly in action, it was like watching poetry of motion. And then the other side, and you're looking at Dermot Burns, that I'm watching for the last number of years. He's probably having his best season by a country mile at the moment with Limerick. So it had everything, a lot of controversy as well with cards as well. And, and I suppose we'll get into that in a minute. But as a match and as a spectacle, yeah, and I suppose I didn't see the free count because there was a lot of stop-starts. And whereas Limerick might have come out with most of the rucks, they probably didn't come out as quick as they usually do. So Clare worked extremely hard for the result. So, overall, it was a flaking game, and I expected that type of a game in Ennis.
Yeah, what do you think, Richie?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was an unbelievable game, and I was just speaking to a few people during the week, just, you put Cusack Park and Ennis, beside Parnell Park in Dublin Saturday night, there was no comparison whatsoever, and I suppose that's the gulf and the difference between Munster and Leinster at the moment, that they throw up games like that week in, week out. So, no, look, I think both teams will be very happy. I think John Carey will be very happy because, he threw in a couple of guys there that, he wanted to see did they have the bottle for it, and they showed up well. And obviously Brian Lohan then as well, leaving Cusack Park, you know, had they been beaten by a point, there was no guarantees they'd even qualify. You know, but I suppose getting a point, they're into a Munster final, and he can go into this weekend, you know, and probably rest a few of their big players, I would imagine, because there's no need to risk them, and you know, look forward to a Munster final in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, Kieran, this is I'll throw it to you in a second, Michael. But Kieran, I've had this comment made a couple of times this week about Limerick this year sort of remind people of Clare in 1998. They'd won a couple of All-Irelands, but then there seems to be a couple of bits of tetchiness going on, red cards, distractions. But Kieran McGrath says the reaction of Limerick supporters after what was a great contest Sunday and the footage of John Carey at halftime was really over the top. This year is starting to have a real 1998 feeling to it. Do you get any sense of that, Kieran?
I don't, because, you know, they're a different type of group, and I suppose you kind of touched on it there. You know, there's various challenges that's been presented to this crew, you know, not only this year, but in the last 4 years. And, you know, I would say, you know, I can't get into John Kiley's head, but I know if he sits back and watches the replay of that match and he looks at the chances, really, that Limerick missed, number one, and I suppose the personnel that wasn't available to him also, who will be absolutely thrilled. No different to Klopp the other night making 9 switches against Southampton. You know, that's the road Limerick are going down, you know, to have faith on whoever comes in, that to go straight into the system. And so, like Richie said, I'd say they're probably extremely happy, but I don't know, is there much of a comparison, really? I saw a text coming up there. Someone said there about being the Tottenham Hotspur of the Premier League. And come here, you could pick a few counties that fall into that category.
Just on that, John Kiley talked after about appealing Gearóid Hegarty's second yellow. They actually can't appeal because there's no suspension given down. You can only appeal when there's a suspension given down. So part of me thinks it was John Kiley being somewhat clever and changing the narrative maybe from off the field activities as well. But just on that red card, I'll go to you, Richie. What did you think of that? Are we in a worrying place for hurling if that's the type of thing that is, you know, regarded as a yellow and could lead to some of the best players in the country seeing the line as a result of an incident like that?
Listen, Vernie, like I looked at it over and over, and firstly go back to his first yellow card. You know, David McInerney should have been the guy that was given a yellow card, not Gearóid Hegarty, number one. Number two, the Clare defender, I'm not sure who it was that Gearóid struck his hurl for the second yellow card, went down as if he was after being shot. So, you know, it's worrying times. And being honest, I thought Colm Lyons was very poor. I thought he was very poor throughout the game. I thought he was very hard on Limerick. You know, he went to his linesman, David Hughes, who didn't see anything. He went into his umpires, who didn't see anything. He went back to his linesman, who again probably reiterated he didn't see anything. And then he made the decision himself that I think he kind of felt pressurised into giving a card then because he'd taken so much time.
Just on that, Richie, I'm wondering, when you were at the top as well, did you find yourself being officiated a bit differently, like maybe Limerick are now?
Yeah, like, and I probably was going to get to that as well, you know, and like, look, it's just, I suppose it's just the way it goes, you know, like, you know, maybe people get sick of the one team winning, and, you know, you have to, in one words, people do, and then in other words, you have to take your hat off to teams for being so good and so consistent. And I think, you know, Limerick are, you know, they are seeing a result of that, you know, and I think it's very, very tough on them. Obviously, Gearóid Hegarty has been in the media and the spotlight before last Sunday, harshly, in my opinion. Obviously, the Galan incident the last day. And I just think referees are keeping a very, very, very close eye on Limerick. I think it's very, very hard, as I said, but it is the narrative that's out there, and they're just going to have to be very careful going forward. But for me, definitely either card wasn't a yellow card. And
just like, yeah, go on. Yeah, just on that, Kieran, I'm wondering, like, the human element has to be taken out of it for a referee. You know, there's narratives out there and different people saying different things, but a referee should not really be listening to anything outside. I know that's a difficult thing maybe to do, but they're supposed to be, you know, totally impartial. And are we seeing little bits and pieces kind of seeping into the mindset of referees that, I don't know, people are calling for X, Y, and Z to get a yellow card or keep a close eye on X, Y, or Z. Like, and that's not really what should be filtering into their brains, but it seems like it might be.
Yeah, but in fairness to Gearóid, you know, I watched him all the year, and his second half of form against Tipperary and definitely last week, actually. Probably there are two games that stand out in my head where he appears to be totally disciplined, composed, and, no flicking, no tapping, just totally focused. And it's obvious, referees are probably using certain games leading into last Sunday and probably judging wrongly on any player, really. But, the only thing I'd say, without being too hard on the officials, because a lot of them at the moment appear to be out of their depth because the game is changing so much and it's extremely quick. So if you were to pick your top referee in the country, he would have probably struggled last Sunday with the type of a game that it was, because it was non-stop, it was freeze, there was pulling, there was dragging. But, common sense has to come into play here. And on the Garrod Hegarty incident, for me, there was probably no yellow. And if there was one 50-50, as Richie said, it might have been the flick, and just about might have been the flick. So I just feel, without being hard, the ref last Sunday was totally out of his depth. And, he was that's just the feeling I got. And unfortunately, he was bang smack into the middle of a game. It was like the Coliseum. There was so much at stake for Clare. And it was flat to the mat from start to finish. And anytime there's a game with that potential, you want the best person to officiate it. But unfortunately, this game's only highlighting. But, I think myself personally, it isn't only this year. I think they're under a bit of pressure for the last number of years.
Adrian McGrath says free count was Limerick got 12 scores from place balls out of 121. Clare got 10 from 24, I believe. Flash says Lohan's Clare are as bad as Mourinho's Real Madrid with their antics. And then a question from Brian Kelly. I thought this was an interesting one. Do you see Kyle Hayes going back to the half back line, Kieran? Because if he does, you'd imagine that means either Dan Morrissey doesn't start anymore or Mike Casey doesn't. So that's a real conundrum if Kylie ends up having everyone available.
Yeah, but I suppose, I'd love to be a manager in that position, because Kyle Hayes, I suppose, he's one of the players that, I suppose the word that is used now, a utility player. You could put him in a lot of positions and, he'd probably hold his own in most of them. Even though last Sunday, whereas he could have come off the field scoring about 3 or 4 points, any time he was on the ball, he was a machine. It took 3 or 4 and it was a free. Myself personally, I wouldn't move him there at all, because I can see him exploding as the year goes on, and he's going to be a serious threat. He's going to take serious watching, not only from 3, but 2, 3, and 4. He's going to take serious attention. And as I said, myself personally, I would leave him there, because you can always put him 14, you can always put him 11, and you can always bring him out for the puck out. So he just gives you so much when he's in there. Okay, obviously at half back, he's a dominant halfback. He controls that particular area. He can go up and down, and he can look after his own little patch. But I think for Limerick, I think he could be a lot more lethal as the year is going on if he's left alone.
Would you agree with that, Richie? I mean, you obviously played forward your whole life. Do you look at him and think he's basically got everything required to play in the forward line?
Yeah, and I suppose I said it, early in the season that, for John Kiley to do what he done the first night against Cork, to place him at full forward, he's been an all-star wing back for the last 2 seasons, and to be able to do that, his versatility is phenomenal, really, and I don't think there's any need to move him back, to be honest. I think Mike Casey is after having a brilliant season up until now. And Dan Morrissey probably is more comfortable at number 7 than he would have been at number 3 anyway. So for me, I don't see it happen. And as Kieran said, I think it gives the opposition more to think about with Kyle up in the forwards, because throw Galan in there, Cian Lynch, Tom Morrissey, these guys, the more kind of household names you have in the forward line, the more watching they take. And I'd leave him. I'd like to see him at 14. Keep him at 14. Obviously, I'm not sure if Cian will be back for a Munster final. But if he's not, he'll probably line out at 11. But I'd like to see him at 14 as the year goes on.
Yeah, Michael, Jackie Tyrrell said this week that more focus needs to go into players going down too easily, and that the accountability needs to be on the players feigning injury. Do you, we've had a few more days to let that soak in. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big believer in honor. That you're just doing the right thing to, I suppose, protect the integrity of the game, even if it's not necessarily winning a free on a given occasion. So, big believer in honesty and probably honor in that regard. And if we start, like we saw would say with the Tiernan McCann, you know, I don't know, what would you call it, a hair pull a few years ago, some other little incidents like that where players are just going down too easy, where we're almost been soccerized, so to speak, and you don't like to see it. If a player goes down, you want it to be they're going down after the force of a belt that deserves going down, or if they're going down that they actually need attention. The one I'd go back to is, I remember when Bill Cooper nearly took the head off Richie Hogan in the All-Ireland quarter-final in 2019. He nearly decapitated him, and Richie was up again straight away. There was a couple of times, even Tommy Walsh, that happened throughout his career, just outrageous belts, down, up, straight away. I prefer that. That's just my own personal opinion. I prefer, if you're going to win, that you'd win. I was only listening to an interview with Ronnie O'Sullivan this morning, and it's about winning the right way, that he'd be happier to win doing, what he feels is they're playing the right way, or, being the right way, rather than winning through potentially feigning an injury or going down. That's not to say, like, buying a free by holding a hurl or something like that. I think that's a bit different. I think that's kind of cuteness, but the idea of feigning injury is just not something I like. I think it's something that, if referees get a glimpse of that, if they see that happening, come down hard on it straight away, nip it in the bud straight away, and it's, very, very unlikely to happen again. If you think a player is, if it's simulation or diving, call it there and then. It's either a yellow or whatever it is. Come down hard on it, nip it in the bud, because it's just not something. It's something that has creeped in, and it's a dangerous thing. Once it starts creeping in, all of a sudden it becomes commonplace. And, maybe you're coaching players to actually go to ground then and make a bigger deal of something than it actually is. So I would be big on clamping down on that as hard as we can and make sure that it doesn't become a feature of our game. Because, listen, lads, we've the best game in the world, and you just don't want things like that coming in, infiltrating it, and taking a lot of the goodness away from it.
Okay, we're going to go into match previews now, and we're going to start off with Waterford against Cork. Join us on patreon.com/OurGame if you want to see the rest of that. See the full video only at patreon.com/OurGame.